The next day's stories, the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM, your fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. We'll get reaction from MPs on who fared best at PMQs today, and we'll have the latest, of course, on sanctions against Russia, with the Prime Minister announcing that further sanctions are expected. We'll also be in Berlin, where Germany has raised the stakes on measures against Russia by delaying the certification of Nord Stream 2. And we'll discuss whether this season's Champions League final should be moved from St. Petersburg amid the invasion of eastern Ukraine. That and so much more on the programme. As always, do get in touch. Interested on your views on Ukraine and indeed everything else, you can email me at gbnews@gbnews.uk or indeed tweet us at gbnews. That's all between 3 and 4 on this Wednesday afternoon. But first, at the top of the hour, is the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, the Prime Minister has announced further military support for Ukraine following the threat of a full-scale invasion. Boris Johnson told MPs defensive weapons will be sent to Kiev as a result of Russia's aggressive behaviour. Our security editor Mark White has more.
In the trenches overlooking Ukraine's rebel-held areas, soldiers say they've been coming under increased mortar fire. Another Ukrainian serviceman is reported to have been killed today and several more injured. It follows a funeral in Kiev for a soldier killed at the weekend. So far, the shelling is coming from rebel fighters. For the moment, at least, there is no sign of Russian troops. In the comments, the Prime Minister said it wasn't too late for Russia to pull back from the brink.
What we want to see, Mr. Speaker, is de-escalation by Vladimir Putin. There's still hope that he will see sense, but we are ready very rapidly to escalate our sanctions as I have set out.
In Moscow, even as his troops wait to cross into Ukraine, Vladimir Putin said he was still open to negotiation.
Our country stays open for direct and honest dialogue, for the search of diplomatic solutions for the most complex issues.
In rebel-held Donetsk, there are no signs of Russian tanks yet, but many locals say they'll welcome their arrival.
I think there will be radical changes in everything. Maybe peace can finally come. The shooting has stopped, and for us, this is the most important.
We'll pull through the economic adversities. We'll weather it by ourselves.
As Western governments begin implementing sanctions against Moscow, they warn any further Russian aggression will be met with even tougher measures. Mark White, GB News.
Of course, this is a developing story, and we'll keep you up to date on it here on GB News. In other news now, the Governor of the Bank of England says there's a clear risk of inflation remaining high. It hit 5.5% in January. That's the highest rate in 3 decades. Andrew Bailey told Parliament's Treasury Select Committee he forecasts it'll peak at nearly 7.25% in April, when a rise in the energy cap comes into effect. The London Mayor has been accused of failing to follow due process over the resignation of the Met Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick. Former Deputy Commissioner Sir Stephen House is now calling on the Home Secretary to launch a review. Sadiq's Khan office has rejected claims the situation was mishandled. A man who stalked the British tennis star Emma Raducanu has been handed a 5-year restraining order. Bromley Magistrates Court heard 35-year-old Amrit Magar turned up to the teenager's home multiple times, leaving gifts on her porch and taking her father's shoe. It was also heard that 19-year-old Miss Raducanu no longer feels safe in her own home. Staffordshire Police have renewed their appeal for help to find a woman who's been missing since Saturday. CCTV footage shows 19-year-old Emmy Robson was last seen in Weston-in-Crewe at roughly 7 p.m. wearing a red hoodie, black jogging bottoms and black trainers. Strong winds and heavy snow will hit the UK this week as the nation faces continued warnings about significant flooding. It comes after 3 storms battered the UK within a week, causing the River Severn's water levels to rise and flooding parts of the Midlands. The Environment Agency has issued 2 severe flood warnings for the Severn, where the levels could overtop the defences. Students could be blocked from taking out student loans at university if they fail their maths and English GCSEs. Well, it's under government proposals that are going to be published later this week. And the plans will include things like limits on student numbers and also minimum entry requirements for some university applicants. Heathrow Airport has recorded its lowest annual passenger numbers for 50 years. Britain's biggest airport says numbers fell to under 20 million last year. That's the lowest since 1972. They say that although numbers are behind forecast, they do expect a strong summer for tourism. You're now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to the briefing and Darren.
Thank you, Rosie. 6 minutes past 3 o'clock. You're watching GB News online, on TV and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you indeed for your company on this Wednesday afternoon. Well, unsurprisingly, PMQs today was dominated by the Ukraine-Russia crisis. The Prime Minister was quizzed by the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, on his sanction package against Russia and whether it went far enough. The Labour leader also raised the issue of the propaganda network Russia Today and questioned whether it should be allowed to continue to broadcast here in the United Kingdom. Well, in a moment, we'll hear some reaction from 2 MPs who are going to join me today. They include the Conservative Alicia Kearns and Alistair Carmichael from the Liberal Democrats. We'll be speaking to them in just a moment. But first, let's look back at some of the highlights of today's Prime Minister's Question Time.
Mr. Speaker, we all want to deter aggression in Europe. We're not dealing with breakaway republics. Putin is not a peacekeeper. A sovereign nation has been invaded. The Prime Minister promised that in the event of an invasion, he would unleash a full package of sanctions. If not now, then when?
The UK has been out in front in offering military support to Ukraine, and I'm grateful for what he said yesterday about the need to make sure that we keep ammunition in reserve for what could be a protracted struggle over this issue. But there has been in no doubt about the extent of the package that was already been set out yesterday and what we are already doing. Because, Mr. Speaker, I don't think people quite realise that the UK is out in front. We've sanctioned 275 individuals already. Yesterday we announced measures that place banks worth £37 billion, under sanctions in addition to more oligarchs. And, Mr. Speaker, there is more to come, and we will be stopping Russia. We will be stopping Russia from raising sovereign debt, stopping Russian companies from raising money, and stopping Russian companies, as I said yesterday, even clearing in sterling and dollars on international markets, Mr. Speaker. That will hit Putin where it hurts, but it is absolutely vital that after this first barrage, we work in lockstep with friends and allies around the world.
I hear what the Prime Minister says about sequencing and about further sanctions. But there's already been an invasion. And there's clearly concern across the House that his strategy, I accept unintentionally, could send the wrong message. So if the Prime Minister now brings forward his full package of sanctions, excluding Russia from financial mechanisms like SWIFT and a ban on trading in Russian sovereign debt, he will have the full support of the House. Will he do so?
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. I think yesterday, and I'm grateful, by the way, for the general support that the opposition have given, not just to our economic sanctions, but also to the package of military support, which will, as I've said, intensify. What we want to see, Mr. Speaker, is de-escalation by Vladimir Putin. There's still hope that he will see sense, but we are ready very rapidly to escalate our sanctions as I have set out. And under the measures that this House has already approved, and that we can now target, Mr. Speaker, any Russian entity, any Russian individual. We can already target not just the breakaway republics, the so-called breakaway republics in the Oblast of Donetsk and Lugansk. We can target members of the Duma who voted to recognise them.
It does have my support, and if it's used, we will support it. We must also do more to defeat Putin's campaign of lies and disinformation. Russia today is his personal propaganda tool. I can see no reason why it should be allowed to continue to broadcast in this country. So will the Prime Minister now ask Ofcom to review its licence?
Mr. Speaker, I believe that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, has already asked Ofcom to review that matter. But what I will say, Mr. Speaker, is that we live in a democracy, Mr. Speaker, and we live in a country that believes in free speech. And I think it's important that we should leave it up to Ofcom rather than to politicians to decide which media organisations to ban. That's what Russia does.
The request was for a review, and I'm very glad to hear that review is now happening. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to be deflected from the unity that this House needs just at the moment. At the weekend, the Prime Minister said that if Russia invades Ukraine, he will open up the Matryoshka dolls of Russian-owned companies and Russian-owned entities to find the ultimate beneficiaries within. Well, Russia has invaded, and it's time to act.
Mr. Speaker, we are, as I said, bringing forward in the next wave of sanctions measures that will stop all Russian banks, all oligarchs, all Russian individuals raising money on London markets, and we are also accelerating, Mr. Speaker, the economic crime bill, which will enable us in the UK to peel back in the next session, Mr. Speaker, to peel back the facade of beneficial ownership of property in the UK and of companies. It's gone on for far too long. We are going to tackle it under this government, Mr. Speaker.
There you go. That was the Prime Minister at PMQs a little earlier. Will join me now to discuss all of this is the Committee member and Conservative MP Alicia Kearns and the Liberal Democrat MP for Orkney and Shetland, Alistair Carmichael. Thank you very much indeed, both for joining us here on GB News. Alicia, let's start with you first of all. Clearly, Labour feel that these sanctions, and it's not just Labour, it must be said, some of your colleagues as well, simply don't go far or fast enough. Do you agree with that?
I think across the House, what we've seen is unanimity that we want to see a strong, fast strike that shows Russia and Putin that they can't just continue to make incremental gains. They can't just declare part of Ukraine to be independent and therefore under essentially Russian de facto control. And I think we all felt that there needed to be a strong message sent immediately to prevent Putin from going any further.
In saying that, though, many feel that a couple of banks and some individuals isn't quite the strong response that the Prime Minister seems to have alluded to, given the fact that this invasion's already begun.
Absolutely. In the chamber yesterday, I pressed the Prime Minister to go further and faster. I asked him to blacklist all Russian banks and to ban the city from servicing any Russian state companies, as well as their accountants and the lawyers and those that hide the oligarchs' money. I've been very clear that I want every ill-gotten ruble ripped from our system, and I want a strong cost, because only strength is what Putin will respond to. And actually, we don't want to be standing here in a few days going, OK, well, now we're at containment stage. Again, he's gone a bit further. OK, he's now occupying the whole Donbass. OK, well, we need to make sure he doesn't go to Kiev. We have to stop him now. And yes, I would have liked to have seen stronger package of measures yesterday, but it does look like those are coming forward. And so I think my message to the Prime Minister remains, do them now and do them quickly.
Yeah, indeed, and the Prime Minister did allude to the fact that more sanctions were likely. Alistair, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm afraid, Darren, you're not going to get much of a debate today, because I'm agreeing with just about everything that Alicia's just said. It's all very well for the Prime Minister to stand at the dispatch box today and say that, yes, more is still coming and that there's all in stream and the rest of it. But he had the opportunity yesterday to do all these things. Sanctioning 3 individuals who've already been sanctioned by the United States of America since 2018 really doesn't cut it. When you say we've got to walk in lockstep, that ignores the fact that, in fact, the person who's pulling everybody back at the moment seems to be our own Prime Minister. Yesterday, if we had done the sort of things that Alicia was talking about there, the comprehensive sanctions against all Russian financial interests, and not just sort of tipping a wink to the Russian oligarchs who are already here and saying, if you don't get your money out in the next 10 days, then we're coming after it, then, you've really missed the opportunity here. And a message like that would have been one that Putin understood, because we see this right since 2014, since he invaded Crimea. And time and again, he just takes a bit, he banks it, and then he will go back. But then every time, it's like the wave coming up the beach, it goes that little bit further. And unless you take meaningful action, then he's going to keep coming back for more.
Alicia, one of the things that Sir Keir Starmer brought up today was Russia Today, which is continuing to broadcast here in the UK. I think they've banned it in Germany, for example. Nadine Dorries is looking into this, has asked, I think, Ofcom to review its licence. Where do you stand on RT? The Prime Minister seemed to be suggesting that we still live in a democracy and that it has got a right, if it's not breaking the rules, to carry on broadcasting.
I've been very clear that my view is that it should be banned. And the reason it should be banned is it's essentially a hostile state actor. It's an arm of a hostile state, one that carried out essentially a nuclear attack on our territory in Salisbury. So I have no qualms at all with saying that we should ban this weapon, information weapon. And when people say, well, that will mean the BBC is banned in Russia, well, first of all, hardly anyone watches the BBC in Russia, if we want to be honest with ourselves. And those who want to consume it would continue to do the way they consume any information that counters the Russian government, which is through a VPN. So whilst I fundamentally want to protect our Russian BBC service, ultimately, I also want to see Russia Today taken off our air as soon as possible. It's a weapon system. It's undermining the country.
But what it might mean also is that the BBC, there was kicked out, that their correspondents aren't allowed to broadcast from Moscow, and that would be a blow to our understanding of what's happening at the Kremlin. As in, what I'm trying to say is you could kind of reverse that and say, well, not many people watch RT here in the UK, so it's kind of spread as disinformation, if you like. It's pretty limited.
Look, would I prefer to have BBC correspondents in Russia able to operate? Absolutely, I do. But I would also challenge the ability that they currently have to meaningfully investigate. How free are they? I spent a lot of time at the Foreign Office dealing with independent journalists in Russia who were regularly being beaten up, having their offices broken into, information taken away, threatened. Look, we have broadcast into Russia before when we weren't allowed there, and we could do it again. There is no reasons why we couldn't continue to provide the information we need to provide the truth to Russian citizens from outside of Russia. Would it be more difficult? Yes. But is it at the right cost of preventing dangerous disinformation that is being sown, is sowing seeds effectively in our society? Yes. We have MPs in the House of Commons who share Russia Today nonsense. This is something we should be dealing with.
Alistair?
Yeah, look, Russia Today really is the low-hanging fruit here. Yes, it's very obviously a state-owned, state-operated propaganda arm, if you like. And, I don't think we should be having that on our screens. But frankly, at least it's fairly open and transparent in terms of being exactly what it is. Russian information and interference in British politics goes well beyond Russia today. And it's not just British politics. We've seen the influence that they've had in American politics in recent years. We've got to get real about the influence of Russia in interference in Western politics and the role of Russian money in British politics and other countries. And, to that debate, that where the real issue, the real influence and the real damage is being done, Russia today really is a bit of a sideshow.
And just very finally, I'm sure there'll probably be agreement on this as well. I take it that you both kind of think that Russia shouldn't be allowed to host the Champions League final in St. Petersburg as planned. Alicia?
Absolutely not. But then, for example, Xinjiang shouldn't have been allowed the genocide Olympics to go ahead in Xinjiang either. The world has to step forward and realise that culture is a weapon. And so far, our enemies are using it as a weapon, but we're not.
Alistair, many people say sport should stay out of politics.
Well, look, I mean, the political reality is that when you go to Beijing or you go to Moscow, then sport is used for political purposes. And, I think one of the concerns I have about the way that we're tackling the Russian attack on Ukraine as a whole at the moment is that it does weaken our future position if we ever have to come to deal with China in relation to her territorial ambitions, because China could employ exactly the same arguments in relation to Taiwan that Putin employs in relation to the Ukraine. If you're drawing your national boundaries according to ethnicity and language, then if we concede the principle in relation to Russia and Ukraine, then frankly, what answer do we have to China at a later stage?
Okay, and just Alicia, just before I let you both go, I mean, given the scale of this crisis and the intensity of it, and I see that European leaders are going to hold an emergency meeting in Brussels tomorrow evening, starting at 8 p.m. I mean, is this a good time for a potential leadership challenge against the Prime Minister?
Look, I think there's clearly unanimity of view across Parliament that we stand united in wanting to protect our friends in Ukraine. And when I was in Ukraine 3 weeks ago, on the front lines in the last Ukrainian-held territory, in the last building, they were very clear with me that it is the UK that has stood most behind the Ukrainian people. And I think there is absolute certainty across the House that this is what people want to do, and they're standing behind Boris and making sure the country does what they need to do.
OK, Alicia, thank you very much, and Alistair as well. Alicia Cairns, the Conservative MP, and Alistair Carmichael from the Liberal Democrats. OK, you're watching The Briefing here on GB News. It is just after 20 minutes past 3 o'clock. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be talking about that issue of the Champions League final in Russia. Plus, we'll be looking at the cost of living crisis and your energy bills. That and so much more in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
A very good afternoon. Welcome back to GB News, 25 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. You're watching us on TV, online and on your radio. Lots of you get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk, about the situation with Ukraine, Russia and sanctions here in Britain. Nick says Boris has been stoking this particular fire as much as humanly possible since Theresa May gave him the keys to the Foreign Office. I place the blame for every death that will result from this on Bojo, not on Boris's counterpart in Ukraine, not on Putin. Dickie says it seems to me that the Russians have a chokehold on some members of the Conservative Party and are weak to impose pressure on the dirty money coming into our financial services. What have we sent soldiers to fight with Ukraine? Always get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Keen to hear and express a wide range of views. Now, let's stay with this because yesterday the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced that his government had stopped the certification process for the controversial Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. That's in reaction to Russia's recognition of the self-proclaimed republics in eastern Ukraine, while amid sanctions from the UK and America. The step by the German Chancellor will arguably cause the most concern to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Will join me now from Berlin to discuss this is Ben Aris, a journalist there in the German capital. Ben, thank you for joining us. First of all, in the last couple of minutes, the EU have announced that there's going to be a special emergency meeting of EU leaders in Brussels tomorrow night. A sign, isn't it, of just what an effort, I suppose, that the leaders are having to make when it comes to the coordination, not just of diplomacy, but of sanctions themselves at an EU level.
Indeed, the Americans have been very clear about the sanctions. They want to come hard and fast with all the nasty, toughest sanctions they possibly can. That includes cutting Russia off from the international money transfer system like SWIFT that would do significant damage, to stopping Nord Stream 2. In Europe, it's a lot more difficult. The difference being is that there are a lot of European countries that have significant economic exposure to Russia and trade with it. And there's a whole range of views on Russia, from Poland and the Baltic states that are implacable foes of Russia, through to Hungary and Italy, and Austria actually in particular, which are pretty good friends with Russia and do significant amount of business. And so one of the problems with the sanctions is normally they have to be unanimous. And so getting together a package that everybody agrees on is extraordinarily difficult. There's a lot of horse trading going on behind the scenes in order to get through sanctions that are tough enough to make a difference, because they easily get gutted.
Let's talk about Nord Stream 2, though, because clearly the Germans are pretty reliant, aren't they, on Russian energy, on gas. This is quite a significant move, isn't it, by the Germans to stop the certification?
No one was expecting that. I mean, Nord Stream 2 is clearly a target, but the assumption was that it was going to be one of the last and the most extreme sanctions put on. And actually, the Germans came out of the gate after the recognition of the Donbass two breakaway republics. The Germans came out of the gate and immediately killed the pipeline, have stopped it in its tracks, and have made it impossible for it to be regulated. And Russians have spent $11 billion on this thing. It took years, and there was a huge amount of politicking to see it through. It's actually full of gas. You could turn it on literally tomorrow. And now it's been kiboshed and it's been stopped in its tracks. And for Scholz to do that is to come out very aggressively, very clearly to condemn Russia for this move whereby Putin's recognized these two regions and effectively has taken the whole game up to a much more scary level where we're looking at the real possibility of military action.
And just very finally, Ben, our Prime Minister Boris Johnson likes to give the impression that Britain is at the nub of all of this and is coordinating international reaction and sanctions and so on, and diplomacy. What's the view there from Berlin, from the continent, about who essentially is in charge in the West when it comes to the play out of what we're seeing?
It's been a dual process in so much as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Russia, issued its demands in December. Then that led to a round of diplomacy where the Russians specifically wanted to talk to the US in January. That came to nothing. And then it was Macron and Scholz that picked up and did a European track that started in February, which has just finished last weekend, which also came to nothing. The UK's been very active in so much as it's been very vigorously supporting Ukraine and flying in weapons. But in terms of the deal of who the Kremlin is going to cut a deal with to end all of this, it's going to be a joint effort between the US and the EU.
OK, Ben, appreciate your thoughts and analysis this afternoon. Ben Harris there, joining us from Berlin. Thank you, Ben. OK, it is just after 3:30 here on GB News. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we'll be talking about education, fuel poverty, and also that Champions League final in St. Petersburg. That and more. Do get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, at the bottom of the hour, here's the latest news with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 3:31. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Prime Minister has announced further military support for Ukraine following the threat of a full-scale invasion. Boris Johnson told MPs defensive weapons will be sent to Kiev as a result of Russia's aggressive behaviour. President Vladimir Putin says Moscow is still ready to look for diplomatic solutions with the West. The London mayor has been accused of failing to follow due process over the resignation of the Met Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick. Deputy Commissioner Sir Stephen House is now calling on the Home Secretary to launch a review. Sadiq Khan's office has rejected claims the situation was mishandled. A man who stalked the British tennis star Emma Raducanu has been handed a 5-year restraining order. Bromley Magistrates Court heard 35-year-old Amrit Magar turned up to the teenager's home on multiple occasions, leaving gifts on her porch and taking her father's shoe. It was also heard that 19-year-old Miss Raducanu no longer feels safe in her own home. Staffordshire Police have renewed their appeal for help to find a woman who's been missing since Saturday. CCTV footage shows 19-year-old Emmy Robson last seen in Weston in Crewe at roughly 7 p.m, wearing a red hoodie, black jogging bottoms and black trainers. Wildfires will increase around the planet, even in areas previously not prone to blazes like the Amazon. It's according to new research from the UN Environment Programme. It concludes extreme wildfires will increase by 50% within the next 28 years as a result of climate change. You're now up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Don't go anywhere. The Briefing with Darren will be back in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News. It is 25 minutes to 4 o'clock. Now, there's no chance of football tournaments being held in Russia that invades sovereign countries. That's according to Boris Johnson. There are calls for Russia now to be stripped of its hosting rights to the UEFA Champions League final. The match is due to be played at the 68,000 capacity Gazprom Arena in St. Petersburg on May 28th. Gazprom, of course, are the main sponsor of the Champions League 2. They, of course, being a state-owned energy company in Russia. Well, joining me now to discuss this, the football finance expert at Liverpool University, Kieran Maguire Kim. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just first of all, talk us through these growing calls, aren't there, not just from Boris Johnson, but from others, to insist that Russia should not be allowed to host the Champions League final later this year.
Well, the viewpoint taken by Boris Johnson and other senior politicians around Europe is that it would be inappropriate to have a major sports tournament taking place where the country involved, especially as it's a state-owned sponsor as well, is in taking over the sovereignty of another nation. So I think this is part of the soft power response being shown by the European countries, including the UK, and clearly the sanctions being put on by the US as well. So we have seen similar things happen in the past, and we await developments. UEFA does not want to commit itself to making an early decision because it will be hoping that the conflict will resolve itself. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has been taking place over a number of years. Clearly, it's reached a very severe point at present. We had the FIFA World Cup take place in Russia in 2018.
And then this is complicated, isn't it, a little bit further by the fact that Gazprom, of course, are one of the big sponsors of the entire tournament.
Yes, UEFA have around about 6 to 8 senior sponsors involved in, they have organisations such as Heineken and Adidas and so on, who are the core sponsors, but that is to sponsor the tournament. It's not directly linked to where the final is going to take place as far as the tournament is concerned. So the two things should be independent of one another. And if Gazprom also claims to be independent of the Politburo, then surely it would accept the decision which is made by UEFA as an independent organisation itself.
And on a wider scale as well, Kieran, of course, Russian money dominates a lot of European football, a lot of British football.
Yes, we have Chelsea, who are owned by Roman Abramovich. He's lent the club over £1.5 billion through some of his companies, which are based in the British Virgin Islands. We have Everton, who are that they have a financial investment from Alisher Usmanov, who has the naming rights, or an option for the naming rights for the new Everton Stadium. He has sponsored the name of the training facilities. One of his companies, Megaphon, sponsors Everton's women's team. And then we've got the likes of Aeroflot, who are Manchester United's official airline. So Russian money and English football, and also European football, because Gazprom themselves are shirt sponsors elsewhere in Europe, is significant sums.
It is really significant. So what happens, what impact potentially could sanctions have on the game of football? As you've pointed out, many of these clubs are owned or partially owned by oligarchs.
Well, I think a lot of it depends on cash flow and also where these individuals have their money based. Even if the UK government put sanctions upon the UK-based assets of the likes of Alisher Usmanov or Roman Abramovich, they do have a very diverse set of investments and assets around the world. So there's no evidence that certainly on a short-term basis they would have any cash flow challenges. Roman Abramovich has been incredibly benevolent to Chelsea over the years. Chelsea have lost more money than any other club in the history of the Premier League, but he will point out that they're currently the Champions League champions. And that has warranted his investment.
And just very finally, Kieran, what's your sense of all of this? The argument that sport and politics should be separated, that we shouldn't be mixing the two. Is that your view, or your view that that's an impossible position to take, and that in the end, sport is used often by countries like Russia and China to boost their image abroad, and thus it is fair game to say that Russia shouldn't be allowed to host this Champions League final?
Well, we do have sovereign wealth funds from UAE and Saudi Arabia owning English clubs. So their politics and sport are inextricably linked. When it goes as far as invasions and war, I think we're talking about things at a different level, especially in a country to which we have pledged some support. So I anticipate that if matters continue to escalate as far as the Ukraine is concerned, there will be increased pressure on UEFA to find another place to host the final. They were able to do that last year as part of the response to the pandemic. So it can be done. It is a feasible operation and an option for them.
OK, Kieran, really appreciate your analysis and your thoughts this afternoon. Kieran Maguire there from Liverpool University, talking about the financing behind football. Lots of you getting in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Mark says Western capitalist greed has empowered China and Russia. Now we're paying the price. These totalitarian states, play a long game. Paul says to obtain a different perspective on things, Russia Today and Al Jazeera are essential, especially the rolling news. I love watching all the world news stations broadcasting in England. I take the opportunity when GB News are broadcasting a recorded programme, which I may have seen, to ban RT is a mistake. And Mark says the next round of sanctions should not be if Putin goes further. It shouldn't be if he doesn't recall his troops from Ukraine. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Do get in touch. Now let's move away from Russia and Ukraine, because tomorrow the government will release new fuel poverty statistics for England. However, research from the National Energy Action Group suggests that the government might, and their data, be out of date by years. Let's join now Peter Smith. He is the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the National Energy Action Group. Peter, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. You seem to be suggesting that many more people may actually be in fuel poverty than the official statistics suggest.
That's right. It's important to recognise that whilst the fuel poverty statistics that are published by the government are the sort of official Bible in terms of how the government themselves are making progress against the targets that they've set, there is a clear 2-year lag with regards to the data set. So the statistics that we're going to see tomorrow are going to be from 2020. That will be taking us some way into the pandemic, but certainly not getting us up to speed with the current energy crisis and the very real prospect that as of April, energy bills are going to hit an increase of 50%. So there will be a lag in the data. It's important to say as well that that data exists for just England only. So the statistics that are coming out tomorrow are just England only. And we've been highlighting the impact of the energy crisis across the whole of the United Kingdom, because this is something that is impacting all UK nations.
And as you say, it is impacting everyone up and down the length and breadth of the country. Just in terms of the actual figures involved, what are we looking at here, Peter, in terms of numbers?
Well, sadly, before what were record price increases that were announced in October, we believed that there was something like 4 million UK-wide households in fuel poverty. Since then, sadly, with the increases that we've seen in October, we're now in a situation where we believe that about 4.5 million UK households are in fuel poverty. But when we see that huge jump in April, a 50% increase in the cost of energy for the average home, sadly, we think that 6.5 million UK households will be living in fuel poverty that are unable to live in a warm, safe home. Now, beyond those numbers, there's real heartache and devastation, not just to people's finances, but also to their health and well-being.
And there is, in terms of health and well-being, we heard today that obviously those rising prices have an impact, don't they, on people's abilities to do other things. I think one Labour MP at Prime Minister's Question Time was suggesting that people are struggling because they're having to pay those higher energy bills to put food on the table or indeed coats on the children's backs.
Well, it is a desperate situation. People used to talk about eating or eating, and it's got to a stage where people can't do either. So this is a desperate situation, and sadly, the support that has been announced by the UK government isn't sufficient, particularly to support the poorest households through this energy crisis. If we think about the mechanisms that have been announced, there's going to be a council tax rebate as of April. We know that many of households on the lowest incomes don't pay council tax or get a significant reduction, but still struggle with the cost of essentials. And the sort of energy element of the assistance won't be kicking in until October, that £200 heat now, pay later loan, which will need to be paid back. So we haven't discounted our figures, our 6.5 million figure for that assistance, because we just don't think it's going to provide the targeted assistance that's desperately needed to help people through this crisis.
Just very finally, Peter, before we let you go, what is the historical context here? You're painting a picture, and I'm sure it's an entirely accurate one, of kind of desperation for lots of people. But, you know, is this the worst we've ever seen it? Is that really true? Surely kind of fuel poverty has been pretty bad in the past.
Well, certainly we haven't seen a sort of a one-off event which is quite as devastating as the increases that will be as of the 1st of April. It's true to say that those price increases are just in GB, but in Northern Ireland we've also seen successive record increases. So as a one-off event, this is probably the worst in record. But there has been welcome progress. We've continued to invest in the energy efficiency of our housing stock, and that has mitigated to some extent the rises that we've already seen, and will hedge against the future price increases. But we're not really pulling that lever as much as we could. And so, you know, we are highlighting the scale of this crisis and its historical context.
OK, really appreciate that. That's Peter Smith there joining us from the National Energy Action Group. Peter, thank you for your time. Now, a disabled man has said he's been forced to sleep on his bathroom floor for the past 7 years because his local housing authority has failed to fix mould and damp problems in his bedroom. This man lives in West London, and he says that the conditions in his flat make it difficult to breathe. Our reporter, Alice Porter, went to have a look.
Imagine sleeping on this floor every night. That's been a reality for Baldev Mahe, while his son sleeps in the sitting room of their one-bedroom flat.
When it rains, the whole place smells so bad. When it dries out, from outside, the whole place was a bad damp. So whatever happens from outside is happening inside. And I've been complaining and telling him that as well, but they've ignored it.
This is the master bedroom. This is where you should be sleeping.
I was supposed to be sleeping here, but like you see, I mean, like, this actually grows. This will end up happening to your clothing, your bedding, everything. It's disgusting. The only one thing I can say is poorly ventilated flat.
It is. I have to say, it is. Being in here, it feels incredibly cold. Yes, it's February, but it is the difference of when you walk in here. It is an incredibly chilly flat, but it's also, there's just this musty smell throughout all of it, which just, you just know it's damp.
Yeah. The window's broken. It's been like that for a long time, and it does not close at all.
Baldev has developed skin problems and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. His doctors say the damp in the flat affects his breathing. This is one of the many doctors' letters that your GPs have written to the housing company. So this one, and this is back in August of 2019. He is in desperate need of a change of accommodation. His accommodation is inadequate, which is too hot in summer and too cold in winter. He just not has heating or cooling, and the ventilation is very poor. He has mould and damp, which is affecting his breathing. I mean, to have repeated doctors writing on your behalf and that not making any difference, what kind of impact has that had on your mental health?
I took my life because I had enough. They don't care.
Problems with London's social housing has been highlighted over the last few months by Kwejo Tweneboa, who uses social media to name and shame housing companies.
People fail to forget we were in a lockdown not long ago, and these people were forced to stay in there and in their homes day in, day out. So even for some of the cases I've been in and I've suffered with disrepair, I can only imagine what that would have been like for some of the people that I've come across, being in this case, being in that environment where it's absolutely stuffy, you can barely breathe in the house because of such poor ventilation. It's a living nightmare for loads and loads of people.
Catalyst Housing say they agree that the conditions in Mr Mahay's flat are unacceptable. They've temporarily moved him into a hotel and have offered him an alternative one-bedroom home. But he says it's not suitable.
I've got a son at the day, I'm entitled to 2-bedroom. Having a 1-bedroom, it'd be no good. It makes you upset. Basically, powerless. You can't do nothing.
Alice Porter, GB News.
Now, it's been called the biggest shake-up to higher education funding in a decade. The government is set to announce plans to set new minimum entry requirements for university. The proposals, which will be put to consultation, will suggest that students who fail to gain a grade 4 equivalent to a C in the previous grading system in GCSE Maths and English should be barred from accessing student loans. Well, joining me now is Nick Hillman. He's the Director of the Higher Education Policy Institute. Nick, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just talk us through what these new suggestions are.
Good afternoon. Well, we don't have the detail yet because the government's due to make a whole set of announcements tomorrow, but we have what's been trailed in this morning's newspapers. And it sounds like they want to stop people going to university if they don't have a couple of GCSEs in English and Maths, and if they don't have a couple of probably A-levels at, grade E or above, something like that. So we don't have all the detail, and it's going to be a consultation, but it will shut out a few thousand people who might otherwise go to higher education each year.
The question is, Nick, how the devil are these people who haven't got essentially pass levels at GCSE in things like Maths and English able to go to university? Where are they going to university?
Well, I think that's a very fair question, and that's why my advice to the universities would be it's not a policy probably worth fighting the government on very seriously, because I think a lot of the public would be quite sympathetic to what the government's doing here. But there are some people who go to university without those sorts of qualifications. It may be because of the sort of course they're doing. If you want to do a drama course, does it really matter if you don't have a maths GCSE? If you want to do a jewellery design course, does it really matter that you don't have an English GCSE? Some people would say yes, some people would say no. It will only affect the very small minority of those who want to go to university. But it will affect some, probably 15, 20,000 people a year, something like that.
What is the thinking then here, Nick? What is the government up to? Why does it feel the need to do all of this if it is just a small number of people? And in the end, as you say, opinions pretty divided.
Well, we haven't had any official government announcements yet, and there's a ministerial speech in the morning where we'll find out. But my guess would be that they want to reduce the cost of higher education, because obviously if slightly fewer people go, then that's slightly fewer people you have to pay for. Remember, a lot of those student loans are actually paid by taxpayers in the end. And the government would also say, look, if you enter university with low qualifications, you probably will struggle with your degree. You'll be less likely to complete your degree, for example. So why should we be paying for that? And there are good arguments on both sides of this debate, but I can understand why the government thinks this is a sensible approach.
And just very finally and quickly, Nick, if you can, this comes at a time in which we actually are seeing quite a lot of people go to university, particularly people from lower, from socioeconomic difficult backgrounds.
Yes, there's been a huge increase in recent years among people from poorer backgrounds getting into higher education, and that's fantastic. They still lag behind those from richer backgrounds, and they're still much less likely to go to those really famous, really old, really prestigious universities. But there has been a really big increase, which reflects very well on how hard young people work in school and on their teachers in schools as well.
OK, Nick, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nick Hillman there, the Director of the Higher Policy Education Policy Institute. Lots of you been getting in touch this afternoon, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Jerry says, will there be a migrant explosion when the Russians enter Ukraine? Should NATO send to countries bordering Russia to deter more incursions, as I don't believe they will stop at Ukraine. And Terry says that the RT, or Russia Today channel, mainly reports world news and puts out some excellent documentaries which other broadcasters overlook or ignore. Yes, there is some propaganda, but there is also pro-Western propaganda on the likes of the BBC and on GB News. Always get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Whatever you think, we'll get it out on air. OK, that is it from me for today. We're back again at 3 tomorrow. Colin's up next with Brazier between 4 and 6. But first, here's the very latest weather from the Met Office. See you tomorrow.
Hello, I'm Luke Marr with your weather forecast. We've got some very cold and wintry weather over the next 24 hours. Warnings in force for snow and lightning across Scotland and Northern Ireland. This is a cold front pushing its way southwards, introducing much colder air than we've seen of late across the country. Still very mild across the south, but it's this blue air that is pushing its way in, bringing those wintry showers. Now, the cold front will have some heavy rain on it. That turns to snow on its back edge across the higher ground, and then we see frequent blustery showers blowing in through the course of the night into Thursday morning. We could see as much as 10 to 20 centimetres over the hills, a few centimetres down at lower levels. Very cold out there as well, with frequent lightning as that rain continues to sink its way southwards. So a bit of a wet grey start across southern and eastern parts of England and Wales through the morning. Brightening up, though, through the day with scattered showers following on behind. Those of a mixed bag of rain, sleet and snow across southern areas, but frequent snow showers continue where we've got those weather warnings in place. Again, we'll see frequent lightning as well. And feeling cold with strong winds, we'll see blizzard conditions across much of Scotland. Temperatures several degrees down and feeling colder still in the wind. Those frequent showers continue through Thursday evening, gradually fading away, but we could see some wintriness across the higher ground of the Pennines, perhaps North Wales for a time, but gradually things settling down then into the small hours of Friday as a ridge of high pressure builds in. So with clearing skies and winds easing down, those temperatures will start to take a bit of a tumble. So there will be some frost around first thing on Friday morning. Friday then, a real different day across most places. Showers across the north and east fading away, those winds easing down. For many, it's going to be a lovely calm day with plenty of sunshine breaking through during the day. And those winds will be a lot lighter as well. So in the sunshine, not feeling too bad, although a little bit on the chilly side. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me,